Blood pooled around the bespoke Italian leather of his shoes, yet his pulse never spiked. Victor Romano felt nothing for the men begging at his feet. But when a trembling waitress stepped in front of his loaded gun to save a worthless brother, the coldest man in Chicago froze. The brutal wind howling off Lake Michigan was nothing compared to the absolute zero inside Victor Romano's boardroom. Located on the top floor of a legitimate import-export logistics firm in downtown Chicago, the glass-walled office offered a panoramic view of a city Victor practically owned. To the FBI, he was a shrewd, if aggressive, businessman. To the underground syndicate, he was the glacier, a boss who never raised his voice, never lost his temper, and never, under any circumstances, showed mercy. At 32, Victor had inherited a fractured empire and built it into an impenetrable fortress. He didn't touch drugs or street-level crime. His domain was the ports, the unions, and the high-stakes financial laundering that kept the city's corrupt elite afloat. Tonight, the temperature in the room was particularly volatile, though Victor's expression stayed carved from marble. Kneeling on the imported Persian rug was a mid-level enforcer who'd skimmed off the top of a South Side construction contract. Victor stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, straightening his cuffs, waiting for his underboss, Carmine, to finish delivering the man's punishment. "Enough," Victor said quietly. His voice barely carried, and yet it commanded the room instantly. Carmine stepped back, adjusting his jacket. Before Victor could pass final judgment, the heavy mahogany doors of his office burst open. That alone should have been impossible. Victor's private floor was guarded by 4 armed men. Yet stumbling through the doorway, flanked by 2 furious security guards who'd clearly been caught flat-footed, was a woman. Drenched from the Chicago rain, her cheap trench coat clinging to a frail frame, dark hair plastered to her cheeks, framing wide, terrified, but deeply furious, hazel eyes. "Mr. Romano," she gasped, fighting the grip of the guard trying to drag her back out. "I need 2 minutes." Victor didn't flinch. He didn't even reach for the firearm concealed beneath his jacket. He just tilted his head, calculating. It wasn't her intrusion that surprised him. It was the fact that she'd managed to slip past his state-of-the-art security and a small army of hardened veterans. "Let her go," Victor murmured, turning fully toward her. "If she has a death wish, it's only polite to hear her out before granting it." The guards released her, stepping back, hands still hovering over their holsters. The woman stumbled forward, catching her breath. This was Melline Hayes, 24 years old, an exhausted junior auditor at a failing downtown accounting firm, currently staring down the most dangerous man in the Midwest. "My name is Melline," she said, her voice shaking hard before she forced the fear down. "My brother is Leo Hayes. I know he owes you." At the name, Carmine let out a low, derisive scoff. "Leo Hayes owes us 300 grand, sweetheart, and he's vanished. You shouldn't have come here. Now you're on the hook." "I know what he owes," Melline snapped back, surprising even herself with the venom in it. She looked straight into Victor's cold gray eyes. "He's a compulsive gambler and an idiot. But he's my brother, and my mother is on a ventilator at Mercy Hospital. If you kill him, her heart gives out. If you kill me, she has no one left to pay her medical bills." Victor walked slowly toward her, footsteps silent on the thick carpet. When he stopped, he was mere inches away. She had to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. Up close, the sheer predatory weight of the man was suffocating. "Melline," Victor said softly, testing the name. "You broke into my private office to tell me a sob story. The hospitals of Chicago are full of dying mothers. The morgues are full of foolish brothers. Why should I care about yours?" "Because," Melline reached into her soaked coat. Instantly, 3 guns snapped up, leveled at her head. Slowly, Victor warned, raising a hand to hold his men back. With trembling fingers, Melline pulled out a thick, water-damaged manila folder and slammed it onto Victor's pristine glass desk. "Because I know how you're laundering your money through the O'Hare freight routes," she said, voice dropping to a desperate whisper. "Leo used to boast about the numbers he ran for your lower-level guys. I'm an auditor. I took one look at the public tax filings for your shell companies, specifically Apex Logistics, and I saw the holes. The IRS will see them too. You have a leak, Mr. Romano. Someone inside your own accounting department is setting you up for a federal RICO charge. Silence fell over the room, heavy, suffocating. Carmine's face went pale. Victor picked up the folder and opened it, scanning the meticulously highlighted documents. The spreadsheets Meline had stayed up 3 sleepless nights compiling. She was right. The discrepancies were glaring, if you knew exactly where to look. Someone had been artificially inflating losses, leaving a paper trail leading straight back to Victor's personal holdings. Who did this? Victor asked, voice dangerously low. I can find out, Meline bargained, sensing the microscopic shift in the room's balance of power. I can trace the false entries. I can fix the books so the feds find nothing but a boring, failing transport company. But in exchange, you wipe Leo's debt clean. You let my family go. Victor stared at her. She was terrified, her pulse hammered visibly in her neck, and yet she'd walk straight into the lion's den, armed with nothing but numbers and sheer, unadulterated desperation. For the first time in a decade, Victor Romano felt a flicker of genuine intrigue. You have 48 hours, Victor said smoothly, closing the folder. Carmine will set you up in a secure room on the 3rd floor. You don't leave this building. No personal calls. If you find the rat, Leo's debt is forgiven. And if I can't? Meline asked, her voice cracking. Victor leaned in, expensive cologne and faint gunpowder washing over her. Then your brother goes in the river, Meline, and you spend the rest of your life cooking my books to pay off his debt. Welcome to the firm. For the next 24 hours, Meline existed in a state of caffeine-fueled terror, locked in a windowless office on the 3rd floor of the Apex Logistics building, the room smelling of stale coffee and printer ink. Outside her door stood Carmine, a silent, imposing shadow who brought her food and offered no conversation. Victor Romano's financial web was a labyrinth of deceit, a brilliantly constructed puzzle of offshore accounts and phantom corporations. But Meline had a gift for patterns. As she dug deeper into the digital ledgers, she realized the embezzlement wasn't a clumsy mistake. It was deliberate sabotage. The fake invoices were being routed through a holding company called Vanguard Equities. A quick search of the Chicago Public Registry revealed Vanguard's registered agent, a lawyer known for representing the Falcone family. Even Meline, an outsider to the criminal underworld, knew that name. Gregory Falcone was a ruthless, old-school mobster who controlled the West Side, locked with Victor in a bloody, unspoken Cold War for 3 years. But the real twist hit her at 2 a.m., freezing her blood entirely. She traced the login credentials of the user who'd initiated the false Vanguard invoices. The user ID bounced through several proxy servers, heavily encrypted. But the authorization code attached to the transfers was a sequence of numbers she recognized instantly. 082498. August 24, 1998. Her brother Leo's birthday. Panic seized her throat. Leo hadn't just borrowed money from Victor Romano to gamble. He'd been bought by Gregory Falcone. Leo was the rat inside the system, planting the fake ledger entries to frame Victor for the FBI while simultaneously siphoning from Victor's lower-level enforcers to fund his own escape. Oh, Leo. What did you do? She whispered into the empty room, tears finally spilling. If she told Victor the truth, he wouldn't just kill Leo, he'd probably torture him first. If she hid it, Victor's men would eventually find out anyway, and she'd be killed for the cover-up. At 3:15 a.m., the door clicked open. Victor stepped in, jacket and tie discarded, white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, revealing a glimpse of dark ink creeping up his collarbone. He looked tired, but intensely alert. You stopped typing 20 minutes ago, Victor noted, pulling up a chair across from her and setting down 2 cups of steaming black coffee. Did you hit a wall, Meline? She quickly minimized the window on her screen, heart hammering. I'm just tired. It's complicated. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly. He never missed anything, especially not the sudden shift in her posture, the way she guarded her keyboard. He reached out, gripping her wrist gently but firmly. The contact was electric, a shocking warmth against her freezing skin. "I don't like liars, Meline," he said softly, thumb resting against her racing pulse. "I gave you a chance because you were honest with me upstairs. Don't ruin it now." "I found the leak," she blurted, unable to hold his gaze. "The money's being funneled to Vanguard Equities. It's tied to Gregory Falcone." Victor's expression hardened, a lethal calm settling over his features. "Falcone. He's getting bold. Who on my inside is pushing the buttons?" Meline hesitated. A fatal 2 seconds of silence. Victor let go of her wrist, stood, and reached over to her mouse, clicking the minimized window back open, the IP traces and authorization codes filling the center of the screen. 082498, Victor read aloud. He glanced at the background check file his men had run on Meline's family. "Your brother's date of birth." His eyes flicked back up. It was Leo. "Your brother wasn't just a junkie gambler. He was a corporate spy for my worst enemy. He didn't know what he was doing." Meline cried, jumping to her feet. Gregory Falcone must have threatened him. "Leo is a coward, Mr. Romano. Not a mastermind." "A traitor is a traitor," Victor said, voice dropping to a glacial whisper. "Our deal is off." "No, please." Meline lunged forward, grabbing his arm. The audacity of it made Carmine, who just stepped into the doorway, draw his weapon. Victor raised a hand, stopping him in his tracks, but he didn't pull away from her grip. "Give me a reason not to end this right now," Victor warned, staring down at her desperate face. "Because Falcone doesn't have what he needs yet," Meline reasoned, mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. "If Leo transferred this data, Falcone still needs the decryption keys to hand the evidence to the feds. I have them. I locked the system down 10 minutes ago, changed the root passwords." Victor's eyes widened, just a fraction. "You hacked my own server." "I secured it," she corrected, breathless. "Falcone's locked out. But if you kill Leo, Falcone will know you're onto him. Let me use Leo's credentials to feed Falcone's own servers a virus. I can wipe Vanguard Equities completely off the digital map. I can destroy Gregory Falcone's finances before he wakes up tomorrow." Victor stared at the brilliant, terrifyingly reckless woman standing before him. Out of her depth, drowning in a world of monsters, and still negotiating with a knife at her own throat. He realized then he couldn't simply discard her. She was a liability, but a fascinating one. "Get your coat," Victor ordered suddenly, turning for the door. "What? Where are we going?" "Falcone is old school. If he realizes his digital access is blocked, he won't wait, he'll send men to collect the physical backup drives from your brother's apartment. We're intercepting them." 30 minutes later, Meline sat in the passenger seat of a bulletproof black SUV, tearing through the rain-slicked streets of Chicago. Victor drove in absolute silence, a loaded Glock resting on the console between them. They arrived at the rundown tenement in the South Loop where Leo rented a miserable studio. The front door was already smashed off its hinges. "Stay in the car," Victor commanded, stepping out into the pouring rain. But Meline couldn't sit still. If Leo was up there, he was dead meat. Disobeying a mafia boss for the second time in one day, she slipped out and ran for the alleyway behind the building, hoping to find the fire escape. She rounded the corner, slipped on the wet cobblestones, and ran straight into a wall of solid muscle. A man in a leather jacket grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the brick wall. 2 others emerged from the shadows. "Well, look what we've got here," the man sneered, pulling a switchblade. "Leo's pretty little sister. Boss Falcone said you might be snooping around. Where's your brother hiding the drives, sweetheart?" Meline gasped for air, vision blurring as his grip tightened. I don't know." "Cut her," one of the thugs grunted. "She'll talk." The blade rose, gleaming under the flickering street lamp. Meline squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the pain. A deafening gunshot shattered the night. The grip on her throat vanished as the man in front of her collapsed, a clean hole through his shoulder. The other two scrambled for their weapons, but a second and third shot rang out with terrifying precision, dropping them to the pavement, groaning. Through the pouring rain, Victor Romano stepped into the alleyway, gun still smoking, eyes locked on Meline with a furious, burning intensity. He didn't look at the bleeding men on the ground. He walked straight to her, grabbed the lapels of her coat, and hauled her against his chest. "I told you," Victor snarled, voice vibrating with dark, primal rage, "to stay in the goddamn car." For the first time, looking up into the stormy gray eyes of the coldest boss in the city, Meline understood the danger she was in had fundamentally shifted. Victor Romano wasn't just using her as a pawn anymore. He was claiming her. And in his world, that was a death sentence of a completely different kind. The rain lashed aggressively against the tinted windows of the SUV as Victor drove them away from the blood-soaked alley. Meline sat trembling in the passenger seat, damp clothes clinging to her skin, mind replaying the deafening crack of his gun. The men who'd been ready to carve her up were bleeding out on wet Chicago pavement, and the man who'd shot them without a second's hesitation was calmly steering with one hand, jaw clenched so tight a muscle ticked beneath the skin. Instead of returning to the fortress of Apex, Victor drove toward the Gold Coast, pulling into the private underground garage of the Drake Hotel, a historic, opulent establishment where, unbeknownst to the public, Victor kept a secure, off-the-books penthouse registered to a private holding entity called the Wellington Sinclair Trust. "Get out," Victor commanded, his voice stripped of its usual terrifying calm, laced instead with a raw, vibrating tension. Meline followed him up the private elevator. The penthouse was breathtaking, a sprawling expanse of dark mahogany, rich velvet, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the turbulent black waters of Lake Michigan. But Meline couldn't focus on any of it. Her knees finally buckled the moment the heavy doors locked behind them. She collapsed onto the marble foyer floor, sobbing uncontrollably as the adrenaline finally drained out of her system. Victor stopped. He looked down at the brilliant, reckless auditor who had turned his perfectly ordered underworld upside down in under 24 hours. Then he knelt, abandoning his ruined jacket on a chair, and did something he hadn't done in a decade. He offered comfort. He pulled her into his chest, letting her weep against his ruined white shirt, his large hands awkwardly but gently stroking her damp hair. "You are a fool, Meline," he murmured against her ear. "A brilliant, indispensable fool. I told you to stay in the car." "They were going to kill Leo," she gasped, gripping his shoulders like he was the only solid thing left in a collapsing universe. "They were going to kill you," Victor corrected, pulling back to look at her, eyes darkening. "Leo's debts are his own. But you are now under my protection. No one touches what belongs to me." The possessive weight of the words hung heavy in the quiet penthouse. Meline swallowed hard, looking into the eyes of a ruthless mob boss, and realized, to her absolute horror, that she felt infinitely safer in his arms than she ever had in her mundane, lawful life. "I need my laptop," she whispered, pulling away with sudden, renewed determination. "Falcone's men didn't find the drives. I still have backdoor access. If we strike now, I can dismantle Vanguard equities before dawn." Victor stood, pulling her to her feet, and motioned to the massive oak desk in the corner. "Do it. Tear him apart." For the next 3 hours, the only sounds in the penthouse were the furious clacking of keys and thunder rattling the glass. Victor poured 2 glasses of scotch, set one beside her, and watched her work with a predatory fascination. She was a maestro, orchestrating a digital massacre, bank accounts in the Caymans frozen, routing numbers rerouted, millions belonging to Gregory Falcone systematically vanishing into the ether. But at 4:30 a.m., Meline's fingers suddenly stopped. She stared at the glowing screen, the color draining from her face. "Victor," she breathed, the first time she'd used his first name, voice trembling. He was beside her in an instant. "What is it?" "I dug into the hidden subfolders on Falcone's Vanguard server," she explained, fingers shaking as she pointed to a decrypted email chain. "Leo didn't mastermind this. Leo was just a desperate pawn, the person feeding Falcone the internal bypass codes to your logistics company, the one framing you for the FBI. It wasn't my brother." She clicked a final key, unmasking the sender's encrypted IP address. It traced directly back to the private floor of Apex Logistics, to a terminal authorized by exactly one man. Victor stared at the screen. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room plummeted. The name glowing on the monitor was a betrayal that cut deeper than any blade. Carmine. His underboss. His right hand for 7 years. Carmine had set up Leo Hayes, using the young man's gambling debt as leverage to force him into planting the false ledgers, all while feeding Victor's empire straight to Gregory Falcone. He wanted you to kill Leo, Meline whispered, horrified. If you killed Leo, the only witness to Carmine's treason would be dead. And I walked right into your office and handed you the very files Carmine manipulated. Victor picked up his scotch, downed it in one motion, and slammed the glass onto the desk. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Carmine thinks he's a wolf, Victor said softly, a terrifying, homicidal calm washing over his face. He forgot who owns the woods. Dawn broke over Chicago, casting a bruised purple light across the skyline. Victor Romano walked onto the private floor of Apex Logistics just as the grandfather clock chimed 7, wearing a fresh, perfectly tailored charcoal suit, the embodiment of the glacier once more. Carmine was already there, sipping espresso by the boardroom window, entirely at ease. "Morning, boss," Carmine greeted, turning. "Any word on the Hayes girl or her brother?" "We lost your SUV last night." Victor walked slowly to his glass desk and sat, folding his hands. "Meline is secure. She's been very productive." Carmine's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Productive? She find out where Leo hid the backup drives?" "She found much more than that, Carmine." Victor pressed a button on his desk console. The heavy mahogany doors opened, and two of Victor's most loyal enforcers, Polly and Dominic, stepped in. Between them, battered and bleeding but very much alive, was Leo Hayes. Carmine's face went pale instantly, his hand twitching toward his jacket, a fatal mistake. "I wouldn't," Victor warned, his voice cutting through the room like a scythe. Polly and Dominic already had their weapons drawn, leveled at his chest. Victor stood, walking slowly around the desk. "You underestimated the girl, Carmine. You thought an auditor was just a calculator with a heartbeat. You didn't expect her to bypass Vanguard's firewall and trace the routing numbers straight back to your personal terminal." Carmine backed up until he hit the window. "Victor, listen to me. Falcone is taking the ports. The Italians back east are backing him. You were going to lose this war. I was just securing my future." "By feeding me to the feds?" Victor asked, stopping inches away from the man who'd stood beside him for years. "By using a degenerate gambler to plant false evidence in my own books?" "It's business, Victor." "Just business," Carmine shouted, composure shattering. "You brought a civilian into our business," Victor replied coldly. "You threatened her mother. You forced her to walk into my office." He tilted his head, something deadly and possessive flashing behind his eyes. "For that alone, I should skin you alive." He nodded to Dominic. "Take him to the warehouse. Let Falcone know his rat is dead, and his Cayman accounts are empty. The war is over." As Carmine was dragged out, screaming curses, Victor turned to the trembling man on the floor. Leo Hayes looked up at him, bracing for a bullet. "Get up," Victor ordered. Leo scrambled to his feet, swaying. "Your debt is paid," Victor said flatly. "Your sister bought your life. But if I ever see your face in Chicago again, if you ever come within 100 miles of Meline, I will bury you under the foundation of this building. Run." Leo didn't need telling twice. He fled the office, leaving Victor alone in the boardroom. The empire was secure. Falcone was financially ruined and would be swallowed by his own creditors within the week. The rat was exterminated. Victor looked out over the sprawling city, feeling the familiar, hollow coldness creeping back into his veins. The doors opened softly behind him. He didn't turn, but he saw her reflection in the glass. Meline stood in the doorway, wearing one of his oversized dress shirts and a pair of his trousers pinned at the waist, exhausted, battered by the chaos of the underworld, and yet her eyes burned with a brilliant, undeniable fire. "Is it done?" she asked quietly. Victor turned to face her. "It is done. Your brother's on a bus out of state. Falcone is finished. Your mother's medical bills have been paid in full by a generous, anonymous donor." Meline swallowed hard, stepping into the room. "So I guess this is it. Our deal is fulfilled." Victor closed the distance between them in an instant, looking down into her hazel eyes, feeling that strange, violent warmth flood his chest again. He cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the faint shadow beneath her eye. "The deal is fulfilled," Victor agreed, voice a low, rough rumble. "You're free to walk out those doors, Meline. Go back to your spreadsheets. Your quiet life. Pretend the monsters in the dark don't exist." Meline leaned into his touch, her heart hammering not with fear, but with an exhilarating, terrifying anticipation. "And if I don't want to leave?" A slow, devastating smile curved Victor Romano's lips. The coldest boss in the city leaned down, capturing her mouth in a fiercely possessive kiss that sealed her fate forever. "Then stay," Victor murmured against her lips. "Welcome to the firm." Did Victor and Meline's dangerous romance keep you on the edge of your seat? The underground world of Chicago never sleeps, and the twists are just beginning. If you loved this thrilling story of power, betrayal, and unexpected love, please hit that like button, share this video with your fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life-inspired mafia romance tales. Drop a comment below. Would you have risked it all for love, like Meline? Let us know.